I have a serious question for you.
Okay.
It sounds like the setup to a really bad joke, but I promise it's serious. Where exactly is the line between a fun, morale-boosting workplace prank and, well, a fireable offense?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, at what specific point does having a laugh turn into security escorting you out of the building?
It is a really blurry line. And honestly, it's one that shifts a lot depending on who's watching, who is laughing, and perhaps most importantly, who isn't laughing.
Exactly. Because today in the deep dive, we are looking at two real cases that are just, I mean, they're wild.
Wildly different.
Wildly different, yeah.
Yeah.
But they both completely revolve around that exact question. So in one corner, we have this case involving rubber ducks, a supposed satanic ritual, and a manager who claimed to be literally terrified of the devil.
And spoiler alert for anyone listening, that one actually resulted in a payout for the employees.
A pretty significant one, too. But then, in the other corner, we have a delivery driver, a mysterious package from an adult store, and some X-rated candy. And that one, that resulted in a very valid, very permanent termination.
Yeah, it is a complete study in contrasts. We're going to be unpacking unfair dismissal in Australia today. It's a really complex beast, and we need to look at how bodies like the Fair Work Commission actually decide who gets to keep their job and who gets a massive payout.
Right, and to guide us through this whole legal labyrinth,
Yeah.
we are pulling from a stack of case studies and articles provided by the Australian Workplace Discrimination Representatives, or AWDR for short.
Right. And I think it's worth noting right up front who these folks actually are. They are workplace relations specialists. They've been standing by workers for over 30 years now. But crucially, and this is important, they are not lawyers.
Right.
They are specialists in the system. They often work on a no-win, no-fee basis, and they just help everyday employees navigate this really confusing world of workplace rights.
Which is great, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of us just assume you need this high-priced legal team to fight a firing. But the mission of this deep dive today is to really analyze these real-world examples to understand your employee rights, what actually counts as misconduct, and the surprising twists. I mean, truly surprising. That can turn a legal case completely on its head.
They really do.
Hmm.
So, shall we start with the ducks?
We have to start with the ducks.
Yeah.
This is the case of Emma and Serena Donato versus the Queensland Venue Co. And this all went down in Brisbane.
That's right. So this is a fairly recent one. It was heard by the commission in February 2026. And the setup is pretty standard. You have Emma, who is a duty manager, and Serena, a food and beverage supervisor. And they're working at this venue that's going through a bit of a, a stressful period.
And Emma, trying to be the fun manager, decides she needs to lift morale. Her strategy, rubber ducks.
Which is a classic harmless prank, usually.
Usually, yeah. So she starts hiding these small rubber ducks around the venue. In the kitchen, in the head chef's office, she calls it a lighthearted, silly gesture. But then things escalate. On July 3rd, 2025, Emma and another employee decide to really step up their game. They arrange a whole display on the venue manager's desk.
And this is where the specific details become extremely important.
Oh, they do. The display included several rubber ducks and a hand-drawn pentagram.
A pentagram.
Yes, a pentagram. Emma later explained to the commission that this was, and I quote, ducks engaged in a summoning ritual to summon more ducks. She even planned to put a giant duck there the next day to make it look like the spell had worked.
Which, I mean, from her perspective is just absurdism. It's a goofy joke about toy waterfowl multiplying.
Right.
But we have to look at this from the recipient's point of view. The venue manager, who is the complainant in this case, did not see it as a joke about toy ducks.
No, she definitely did not.
Mm-hmm.
She claimed the pentagram was a symbol evoking the devil. She told the employer she was terrified of ritualistic actions. She actually asked them, was it going to be a rubber duck hanging on a noose next?
That is a very intense reaction, and I think it's important to just pause here for a second. In workplace law, the impact on the victim is often weighed very heavily. If a manager genuinely feels unsafe or targeted by satanic imagery, the employer has a duty to act. And Queensland Venue Co. took this very seriously.
They sure did. They checked the CCTV. They identified Emma putting the ducks there. But then they also dragged her wife, Serena, into it.
Yeah, and this is where the digital footprint comes in, because Serena wasn't actually seen placing the ducks, but she was in a private Instagram group chat with about 30 other employees.
And when the investigation started, she posted a message in that chat saying, who knows what about the aftermath of the ducks, LMAAU.
Right, the classic laughing about, And the employer argued that this text message proved she was mocking the manager's distress. They also accused her of trying to cover up for her wife, So the result? Both of them were fired for serious misconduct and workplace bullying.
So on paper, it looks like a done deal, right? You terrified your manager with satanic symbols, you laughed about it in a group chat, you're out.
That was definitely the employer's stance. They argued the pentagram was a grossly offensive symbol and that the workplace had become hostile, but
Here is where it gets really interesting. This is the aha moment, the twist that I honestly just did not see coming.
the hearing happens in February 2026. And the Donatos bring up a piece of evidence regarding the complainant, the manager who was allegedly terrified of the devil symbol.
1 month. Just 1 month after firing these two women for this terrifying pentagram, the manager went out and got a tattoo.
A tattoo of a satanic pentagram.
You literally cannot make this stuff up.
No, you can't. The Fair Work Commission looked at that, and they used a very polite legal term. They called it incongruent.
Incongruent.
Yeah. They noted that getting a permanent tattoo of the exact symbol that supposedly caused you terror and distress is highly inconsistent with the claim that you were bullied by it.
It completely undercut the employer's entire argument that this was some malicious, terrifying act.
Precisely. The commission ruled that the dismissal was harsh, unjust, and unreasonable. They found Emma's prank was, in fact, harmless. They even noted that the head chef also had a duck in his in tray, so the manager wasn't being singled out.
And what about Serena? How did they explain away the text message?
Well, the commission accepted that Serena didn't actually know the manager was distressed when she sent it. She just thought it was a funny situation about ducks getting out of hand. It was a misunderstanding, not mockery.
So the final result?
Payday. Emma was awarded over $8,400, and Serena got over $7,000. And the commission explicitly declined to reduce the amount for misconduct. They basically said you shouldn't have fired them at all.
Wow. It really shows that context is everything. Because if that tattoo hadn't happened, do you think it would have gone differently?
It's very possible. Credibility is huge in these hearings. But the commission also noted that the disciplinary process was perfunctory, which is basically a fancy way of saying the company rushed it. They didn't really listen to the employees' side of the story. They just wanted them gone.
Okay, so that's the fun case, the one where the employees win, and it's kind of a funny story. But now we have to shift gears. We need to talk about the case of the sex shop parcel. And if you're listening, I have to warn you, the tone here is very different.
Yes, this is a much, much darker example of workplace humor gone wrong. This involves a woman named Rebecca Possingham. She was a postal delivery officer at Australia Post in Adelaide out of the Modbury North Delivery Center, and she had been there about 7.5 years.
And the target here wasn't a manager. It was a junior colleague, Kara Bruzma, who had only been on the job for 5 months.
Right away, that power dynamic is the first major red flag. You have a senior employee versus a very vulnerable junior employee.
And we know she was vulnerable because the source material mentions Kara was specifically uncomfortable with a certain male around because it included a sex shop called Sexyland.
Right. She had explicitly expressed discomfort about this. Possingham knew this. So in March 2024, during a morning smoko break, Possingham and 2 other colleagues hatch a plan.
They decide to send an anonymous package from Sexyland to the junior colleague at work.
And Possingham, being the senior one there, actively encourages it. She tells the younger colleague, the one who was actually placing the order on her phone, she says, "Don't worry, it'll be all right, it'll be funny."
Famous last words.
Yeah.
So the package arrives at the depot, and because of how the rounds worked, Possingham is the one who physically hands this parcel to the victim.
Just imagine the scene. The victim opens it in front of people, and this isn't a rubber duck. It is X-rated Love Heart confectionery.
And the messages printed on the candy were explicit. We're talking phrases like, blow me, eat size, and let's fack.
The victim was disgusted. She was visibly shaken. The source says she initially feared a male colleague had sent it to her, which brings in this whole other terrible layer of fear regarding sexual harassment.
That is an absolute nightmare scenario for a new employee. So obviously an investigation starts. And this is where I feel like Possingham really just dug her own grave.
She absolutely did. We talk about procedural fairness a lot. In the duck case, the employer messed up the process. But in this case, Australia Post did a very thorough investigation. But the employee, Possingham, actively sabotaged herself.
How so?
Well, first off, she breached confidentiality. When you're under investigation, you are strictly told not to discuss it. She didn't just discuss it. She sent unsolicited text messages to the victim's mother.
To her mother.
Yes, to her mother.
Hmm.
And on top of that, she was seen out in the staff car park trying to solicit character statements from witnesses. She was actively trying to influence the outcome of the investigation.
And she tried to blame the other colleague, too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was the final nail in the coffin. She tried to pin the whole thing on Miss Jury, the younger colleague, who physically placed the order on her phone. The commission called that egregious. Possingham was the senior figure. She encouraged it. To then try and hide behind the junior employee just showed a complete lack of integrity.
So when she inevitably took this to the Fair Work Commission claiming unfair dismissal, how did that go for her?
Not well, at all. The commission found her conduct was purposeful and recklessly indifferent. Unlike the Duck case, this was a highly targeted act intended to cause discomfort. It created a hostile work environment, so the termination was upheld, no payout.
It really clarifies the massive difference between misinterpreted fun and actual malice.
Exactly. Malice is the key word there.
So let's zoom out a bit. We've got these two wild stories. What does this all actually mean for the average worker? We mentioned the AWDR earlier. How do they fit into this picture?
Well, the Australian workplace discrimination representatives play a really fascinating role here. As we mentioned, they aren't lawyers, they're specialists. And in a system like the Fair Work Commission, that distinction really matters.
Why is that?
Because the Fair Work system is designed to be accessible. You don't necessarily want a full courtroom drama with barristers and wigs every single time there's a dispute. You want resolution. The AWDR focuses heavily on things like mediation and negotiation.
And looking at their services, they cover a lot more than just unfair dismissal. They do sexual harassment, toxic workplaces, redundancy.
And they operate 24/7. That accessibility is key. Because think about it. When you get fired, you are in a state of shock. You probably might not have the funds for a solicitor who's charging $500 an hour. Knowing there are representatives who work on a no-win, no-fee basis for some claims, it completely changes your access to justice.
The sources mention they handle serious misconduct. Based on our two cases, how would you define that?
Serious misconduct is basically the nuclear option. It's behavior that utterly destroys the essential trust and confidence between an employer and an employee.
So sending X-rated candy to a subordinate.
Destroys trust. Serious misconduct.
Putting rubber ducks on a desk.
Right. The employer tried to call it serious misconduct, but the commission said no, it was just a prank. It didn't break the employment relationship irretrievably until the firing itself did.
And then there's procedural fairness. That seems to be the golden ticket in some of these cases.
It is huge. Even if you screw up, your employer has to treat you fairly during the actual firing process. In the Duck case, the meetings were described as perfunctory. The employer had already made up their mind before the meeting even started. That is a massive failure of procedural fairness.
Whereas with Australia Post,
They dotted their I's and crossed their T's. They had a valid reason. They notified the employee properly. They gave her a chance to respond. And the fact that she responded with lies and deflection only strengthened the company's case.
it sounds like the big lesson here is, if you are being investigated, be honest.
Be honest. And don't text the victim's mother. Which seems like a very low bar, but apparently it needs to be said.
I want to go back to the AWDR's perspective for a second. They talk about a social justice agenda in the source material. What does that mean in this specific context?
It means they view workplace rights fundamentally as human rights. It's not just about dry contract law. It's about the power dynamic. Employers have HR departments, legal teams, vast resources. The individual employee usually has absolutely nothing.
Right, they're on their own.
Exactly. So having a representative, even a non-lawyer, it levels the playing field. It ensures that the little guy doesn't just get steamrolled by corporate policy. In the Duck case, a massive venue company thought they could just quickly fire 2 staff members for a prank. Without representation, Emma and Serena might have just walked away with nothing.
And instead, they walked away with over $15,000 combined.
Because they had someone in their corner to say, hey, wait a minute, look at this tattoo. Look at how rushed this process was.
It really highlights that you shouldn't just accept a termination letter as the final word.
Never. Always question it. Ask yourself, was there a valid reason? Was the process fair? Was the punishment proportionate to the crime?
So if we compare the two again, the Duck case was harsh, unjust, and unreasonable.
Well,
The sex shop case was valid.
the main differentiator is malice and target.
Explain that for the listener.
So Emma Donato wanted to make people laugh. She targeted the environment, the office, the desks. She didn't target a person's vulnerabilities. The manager's reaction was subjective and, as it turned out with the tattoo, completely hypocritical.
And pausing, yeah.
She targeted a person, specifically a vulnerability she already knew about. The intent was to distress, or at best, she was recklessly indifferent to the distress it would cause. That is malice.
And the funny defense didn't work. It'll be funny, she said.
Because humor is subjective,
Yay.
but harassment is objective. If a reasonable person would feel humiliated or intimidated like receiving candy that says "Eat C" at work, it's harassment. It doesn't matter if you personally think it's a joke.
That is a crucial takeaway. I was just joking. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
No, it's not. And actually, the source material brings up another interesting point about constructive dismissal, which the AWDR also handles.
Okay.
That's when you aren't actually fired, but the workplace becomes so toxic or unsafe that you feel forced to resign.
Oh, like if the junior colleague in the candy case had just quit because of the harassment.
Exactly. If she had walked out, she could have potentially sued Australia Post for constructive dismissal. The employer has a legal duty to prevent that kind of environment. That's why Australia Post had to fire Possingham. If they kept her, they were endorsing a toxic workplace.
Right. They had to choose protect the victim or protect the perpetrator.
And they made the right call. Queensland Venue Co., on the other hand, tried to protect a manager from a rubber duck.
When you put it that way, it just sounds ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but legal cases often turn on these weird, bizarre details.
The sources also mentioned that the AWDR helps with general protection disputes. That sounds pretty broad.
It is very broad. That covers things like being fired for exercising a workplace right. So, for example, if you complain about safety conditions or ask about your pay, or you join a union and then suddenly you're fired, that's a general protections claim.
Or hypothetically, if you're fired for your political opinion.
Yes, or your religion. Or even for a temporary absence due to illness. The AWDR sources list a huge range of areas they cover: abandonment of employment, non-genuine redundancy.
Non-genuine redundancy. I feel like we've all seen that happen. Oh, your role is redundant, but then next week someone brand new is sitting at your desk doing your exact job.
Classic move. And that is exactly what these representatives look for. They dig into the facts. Is the job actually gone? Or did you just want a convenient excuse to get rid of Steve?
Wow. We have covered a lot here today, from pentagrams to post offices. If you had to distill this all down for the listener, the person maybe prepping for a meeting right now or just trying to survive corporate life, what is the big lesson?
I'd say the big lesson is that workplace culture is defined by how people feel, not just what is intended. However, in a court of law, evidence is king.
Evidence like?
Like a tattoo you get a month later. Like a text message sent to a victim's mother, like CCTV footage. If you are in a dispute, document everything, and understand that your actions always leave a trail.
And maybe, just maybe, read the room before you plan a prank.
Please. If your prank involves summoning anything or X-rated anything, just don't. Go get a coffee instead.
Solid advice.
But I do want to leave you with one final provocation. We talked about the AWDR being non-lawyers. In a world that is becoming increasingly litigious, where HR policies are written by these high-powered legal teams, isn't it interesting that sometimes the most effective person to have in your corner isn't a lawyer, but a specialist who just knows how the system actually works on the ground?
That is really interesting. Sometimes you don't need a shark. You just need someone who knows how to navigate the waters.
Exactly. It might literally be the difference between just accepting a firing and fighting for a payout you deserve.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive.
Indeed.
Check your contracts, know your rights, and for the love of everything holy, keep your pranks clean. And maybe leave the pentagrams at home.
And the X-rated candy. Definitely leave that at home, too.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.